Good morning, seniors. I'm going to be doing this lecture for Psychology Honors and AP Psych this morning. Psych Honors, you guys are in the Social Psych unit, and AP Psych, we're kind of just jumping around and doing some interesting things to end the year before we get our review going. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you all saw my, excuse me, my Google Classroom posts about senior finals being canceled, which I'm sure you already knew about. The faculty met yesterday via Google Meets with Brother David and Mr. Washington and kind of went through the rationale for the cancellation of finals. Um, to be honest with you, for the AP kids, it doesn't really change anything because we were going to be doing a project anyway, which, now we don't need to do. And we can do a social psych test for the honors kids instead of a final. So this now pushes all of my psychology classes to Friday, May 8th. So we do pick up another 5 days of class, which is cool. Um, I hope you did read my Google Classroom post. I apologize for not doing more of these sorts of lectures with you guys. I have been doing this every day with my U.S. History juniors, and I hope you understand that it wasn't, to be, mean or punitive to you guys at all. I never really felt super confident in my ability to lecture and be interesting in psychology since it is my first year teaching it. But whereas US, I've taught it for 5 years and I can kind of just sit there with one slide and talk for, 30 minutes. But I think it's good. It lets us connect. The psych honors kids, you guys did those flip grids last week. That was awesome. It let me hear you. It let me see you. And for AP Psych, we'll figure out something for Flipgrid as well. I know we're meeting today on Google Meets at 1 o'clock. So it'll be nice to get some FaceTime and some engagement that way. But I want you guys to enjoy your last 2 weeks of school. Please understand, and I think I said this to the Psych Honors kids, that there was a tremendous outpouring of support and solidarity from the faculty yesterday on this meeting regarding the class of 2020. And it's just terrible what's happening and what's happening to you guys at a very, very special time. I think in the long run, it's not going to hurt as bad as it hurts right now. I think you're going to move on to bigger and better things. You're going to go to college and, your senior year is going to be, more forgettable in the near future. But right now you're living it, you're feeling it, and it's not cool at all. And it's not fair, and it's not your fault, and it's really not anybody's fault. But it is what it is, and we have to deal with it. And you're seeing different parts of the country that are going back to work and all of that, and that's great. And it's going to start to happen here as well. But you also have to keep in mind that New York City and Long Island is the hardest hit areas in the country, and some of the hardest hit areas in the world with this disease. Probably, I mean, Long Island is probably a result of being, an arm or an extension of New York City. And in New York City, the density, you go on a New York City subway, just look at how many people are right on top of each other. So it makes sense that New York is getting it or did get it as worse or as bad as anywhere else in the world. We just need to make sure that doesn't happen again. So I think things are going to start to get back to normal a bit, albeit that's probably with a mask. I had my first visit to Costco yesterday in a mask, which I never thought that I would do. So I looked fantastic in it, obviously, and I wore my sunglasses over it to protect my eyes. So I must have looked very interesting to the other people that were shopping there in that Costco. Um, so the video that I put up yesterday with the people running for the toilet paper, nobody really had to run for toilet paper because there was no toilet paper. And paper towels was on a one package per customer limit. So there was really no reason to run for that either. I bought 2 bags of organic vegetables, and one was taken away from me at the checkout because there was a limit on that. So, I'm not, as you know by my appearance, I am not the biggest vegetable fan, so I wasn't really complaining when the guy took them away because then I don't have to eat as many. But I digress. So let's continue with social psych. We have a really cool thing to talk about today, or 2 really cool things about obedience. And a psychologist named Milgram, I think his name was Stanley Milgram, did an experiment at Yale. It's one of the more famous experiments in all of psychology. And he did it in the early 60s. So I think he started it in 1961 and posted the results in 1963. And the justification or the basis for this research was Why are people obedient in the face of authority? Now, you all know about the Holocaust and about the 6 million Jews that were killed during the Holocaust, and that those were not carried out. Those murders were not carried out by Hitler or by any of his top lieutenants. They were carried out by lower level people in the military, in the SS, in the concentration camps, all on an order to do so. So millions of people were murdered, atrocity, genocide, right? Um, for what? All because someone told you to do it. So Milgram thought that it would be fascinating to look into the psychological phenomena that goes behind why somebody might do a terrible thing just because they were told to do so. All right. It seems a bit extreme. I mean, most people, I don't know what the percentage it is, but I would imagine the great majority of people know that killing somebody, especially somebody that didn't do anything to you or is completely innocent, is wrong. Yet, 12 million people were put into concentration camps and killed. So, what gives here? What's at play? So Milgram is going to do this experiment on the Yale campus, and he is going to study obedience. So let's define that. Obedience is changing one's behavior at the command of an authority figure, a person who has the right to demand certain behavior from the people under his or her command or supervision. So they recruited a number of students to come in, and it wasn't just students, I believe. I think could be students, but it could be anybody. Come in and play the role of teacher, meaning that they were going to sit next to a machine that would supply a shock to another participant in the study who was called the learner. Okay? Now, the teacher was an outside person. The learner was somebody that was, they call it a confederate of Milgram, meaning that somebody that was working with him on the study. So either a graduate student or somebody on his team of psychologists would play the learner. Okay. Now, the experimenter would be the third part of the equation. And this was not Milgram, but another one of his confederates or cohorts that would be wearing a lab coat. So the teacher who is sitting there at the shock machine, he would perceive the experimenter in the lab coat as the authority figure, and the learner would be inside like a room and they'd be looking at them. Okay. They would be another part of the experiment. So what happened here is they would ask a series of questions to the learner, and the learner would purposefully start to get the questions wrong. And the instructions to the teacher were that every time they got something wrong, you administered a higher shock. And they wanted to see how high of a shock would the teachers actually go to. And we're talking about as the level goes up, they understood that there could be potentially grave harm given to the learner. So how much would they actually listen? All right. Now, if you look at some of these prods, all right, when the teacher refused to administer a shock, the experimenter was to give a series of orders or prods to ensure that they continued. So prod 1 was please continue. Prod 2, the experiment requires you to continue. Prod 3, it is absolutely essential that you continue. And prod 4, you have no other choice but to continue. So these are the things that the experimenter would be telling the teacher to try to entice or push them, all right, to give bigger and bigger, more increasingly drastic shocks to the student. And look at these results. 65% of the participants, okay, meaning the teachers, continued to the highest level of 450 volts. That's 2/3 that went to the greatest extreme in shock given to these learners. All the participants continued to 300 volts, which I believe was one short. If we look at this, I believe was one short, okay, or one or two short. If you look at extreme intensity and danger severe, all right, all of them got to that point, whereas 66% of them got to the most extreme, which is 435 to 450 voltage. So it was unbelievable that they found how obedient people would be in the face of authority, all because somebody told them to do something. All right. So they wanted to understand all, think about it, the Nuremberg trials, right? All of these men, there were, tons of them that got brought up in front of this tribunal. And they said, how could you have done this? How could you have killed all of these people? And the answer that they continued to give was, because I was ordered to. So then the next question is, but didn't you know that was wrong, regardless of the fact that they ordered it to you? And that is why Milgram studied this, to try to understand human nature in the face of a, pressure-packed situation, and how much we will listen to people telling us what to do when that pressure is applied. All right. So this, if you guys do Psych 101 next year, this is going to keep popping up. Really, really groundbreaking and somewhat scary, I would say. If I want to react to this, I'm going to say it's pretty scary that how much other people can affect us, especially in a pressure situation where we would put other people who are innocent in harm's way just because somebody told us to do it. All right, let's move on. So the other thing that I want to cover today is group polarization. So when members of a group have similar, though not identical, views about a topic and they discuss them, their opinions become more extreme and pronounced. So the first thing that should be popping in everybody's head is the political polarization. And we continue to hear that political polarization is getting worse and worse in America. So if we were to draw the spectrum of the political spectrum, right, we would have center, independent, pragmatist right in the middle. All the way to the right, we would have like strict conservative. All the way to the left, we would have strict liberal. And then somewhere in between, we would have moderate liberal on the left and moderate conservative on the right. So polarization means that at one point, the majority of people were more towards the middle, let's say between moderate liberal, independent, and moderate conservative. And over time, what's happened in America is the polls have taken on more of the people. So that means that the more of the people have left the center and joined the extremes. And you hear it in our political discussions today. Okay? The language has changed. The media coverage has changed. The social media effect on polarization, where news is coming at you moment by moment, minute by minute. I mean, there isn't a moment of the day where you can't find a new, alert or notification come across your phone already reaffirming what it is that you believe. I mean, think about it. If you're a conservative person, let's say you're a center-right, moderate conservative, and you listen to Fox News and you watch or absorb news from various social media outlets, all day, every day, your worldview is being it's being validated, okay? And what it does is it slowly pushes you more and more to the right, where you're not willing to listen to people in the center or people on the left. Now, listen, it's not just the news media that's going to do this. Economic pressure is going to do this. Immigration could do this. The feeling that the country is, with all the new technology, it's moving to the left, it's getting younger, the rise of cities, all of these things can push people in one direction or the other. And it's on the flip side as well. I mean, if you're a center-left moderate liberal and all you do when you get home is watch CNN and subscribe to certain social media outlets, you're just getting your worldview validated, and it's going to pull you further and further to the left. They're always right. You're always right. You're not going to be willing to listen anymore to people in the center or people in the far right. It's that their ideas are no good. And listen, we all have to be honest. There's right and wrong on both sides. There's good and bad on both sides. There's solutions to problems on both sides. And democracy is built on compromise and coming back to the middle in order to meet on common ground. Now, if you really think about it, okay, the things that people are arguing about, there is so many more commonalities to people even on the far right or the far left than they would give, credence to. For example, COVID-19, all right? Doesn't matter how rich or poor you are, how white or black you are, how Republican or Democrat you are. Everybody wants to live. Everybody wants their loved one and their friends to live. Everybody wants people to be safe. So what you typically see during a situation like this is people coming together. 9/11 would be another example. I've never seen the country more together than in the weeks and months that followed 9/11. It wasn't about our differences anymore. It was about what brought us together. And what brings us together is the one flag and the one constitution and the set of values that we all share. Now, listen, polarization has waxed and waned throughout American history. It does seem to be at a high right now, and I really do think that cable news, in my opinion, cable news media and now social media are really the culprits in what's pushing us to the extremes of each side. Wealth inequality as well, immigration, the changing demographics of the country, and people are afraid of what's coming. All right. So groups tend to make more extreme decisions than if you thought as an individual. So the idea is you as an individual have one set of ideas. All right. And then when you get around other people with those same ideas, it almost becomes like a competition between who can be more liberal or who can be more conservative. And then if you look at, well, now I can post it for validation from my social group. We're all one-upping each other on how conservative or how liberal we can be. And, I'm parts of various chats with different groups of friends and teachers and things like that. And I see it. I see them trying to compete against each other. Well, no, I'm more conservative. No, you're more conservative. Look what I did. Look how high I flew my flag. Look how big my flag is versus your flag. I'm more American than you are. I'm more conservative or liberal than you are. Now let's check out this. So extremity of opinion down here and number of people up here. So conform. This is normal conformity, and this is what happens to conformity when we get group polarization. So conformity is a pretty normal thing. Like people are going to adapt their views when they're in groups. Okay, so a reduction in the variability of private opinions after group discussion. So private opinion out here. Okay, and then after group discussion in here. So it did narrow, if you will, the variability in that opinion. Okay, but if we look over here, group polarization, a shift in the extremity of private opinions toward the local norm after group discussion. Look at that shift. And this curve here could go to this side or to this side. Okay, it doesn't have to be one side or the other, but we're still in the normal range for the most part here. Here, we're mostly outside of the normal range of extremity of opinion. So when we go to extremes in our opinion, that is when us moving far right or far left and becoming polarized. And when your opinion becomes extreme, you are much less likely to want to compromise and get something done. And I think we can see this in, the Congress today and the Senate today. They can't get a lot of things done. For example, universal background checks for guns. All right. That's something that I think, if you look it up, Pew Research says 94% of Democrats want it and 89% of Republicans want it. Now, in a democracy, when 89% of the people want something, okay, don't you think that they would actually enact that law? They put the bill to the floor of the Congress, and I don't know if it passed the House and then the Senate killed it, or it didn't even get through the House because the Senate said they were going to kill it. And then the president said if it got through the House and the Senate, he would kill it. Now, that's something that about 90% of the Americans want. But listen, because of the NRA, lobby groups, whatever it might be, they look at it as a check on the Second Amendment, so they say no. Now, that to me is a clear-cut case of the extremity of opinion where people on guns have gone super left or super right. But that's a common sense thing where each state can check the records of the other states to see, well, is this person a criminal? Did they commit a crime in another state and now they're trying to buy a gun in my state? It's a sharing of a database. Just like the FBI shares criminal records with all of the various local and state police forces, so that if a person commits a crime in Florida and then they go and commit a crime in North Carolina, that information is available to the authorities in North Carolina. So the history, you can't just have 50 different criminal histories in 50 different states. this would apply that same sort of logic. This is another way of looking at this. So group polarization, right? Before the group discussion, after the group discussion. So here we have center leftish. Here we have center rightish. All right. And then after the group, everybody's over here on the left after the group discussion. They pulled these few people and everybody went further to the left. They pulled these few people and everybody went over to the right. All right. So views held by the individual group members before and now views held by the individual group members after, all because they got together and discussed it. Okay. Now let's check out this video here. I hope everybody can see this.
So if you watch TV or read the paper or check out the old Twitter, the growing political polarization in America is hard to ignore. Well, now, new polling data by the Pew Research Center confirms just how extreme the gap is. The story starts with this rocky-looking thing, which is actually a snapshot of 1994. It's the distribution of political views. Here, at the highest middle point, we see that 49% of Americans held mixed political views. Now, forward we go to 2014, where that middle of mixed views has shrunk, and the number of steadfast liberals and conservatives has increased. Okay, let's see that change again. Now, Democrats and Republicans have always butted heads, but more and more the disagreement is turning pretty dark. Here's the changing percentage of each party viewing those in the other party as very unfavorable. Now, in 2014, there's also a good chunk who think the other party is actually a threat to the nation's well-being. What's interesting is that this polarization isn't just about politics, it's about a way of life. Pew Research surveyed people to see if they'd rather live in big houses and a spread-out community, or a place with smaller houses and more walkable. The answers of people with mixed political views were about a 50-50 split. But look at the split in preferences between people Pew Research identified as strong liberals and strong conservatives. Overall, Americans are more likely to hold mixed political views. But it's those with mixed political views that are also the least likely to cast a vote. David Botti, BBC News, Washington.
All right, so that's what I have for you guys today. And here's what we just saw in the video. 1994, 10 years later, as people are getting skewed away from the middle and more to the left and more to the right. So this is cool. Hopefully this will stop at some point. Usually a crisis does bring people together. So I would like to think that our politicians, and listen, like the stimulus bill, right? They're working together on that sort of stuff. They've already pumped, I think, $2.5 or $3 trillion into this economy to try to save things. So on that front, they're working together. But as the dust settles and things do get better, they're going to start blaming each other. Whose fault was it? Did the Republicans not act quick enough? Was it the past Democratic administration? Which senators and Congress people were stalling the bills? Then it'll get it, and the blame will be on the state and the local level as well. And cable news media and social media will be there to push the envelope to both sides, each claiming victories and each pointing fingers at the other. So my guess is that in this current media age, this isn't going anywhere anytime soon. But hopefully, things will at least quiet and people will get tired. Because in my opinion, politics is not something to be consumed 24/7. Get your news and then go do something that you'd rather do. Pursue a hobby, do something that's different. Politics is a messy business. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'm going to throw this up on YouTube, and then I will post to Edpuzzle and throw some questions in there and make that your assignment for the day. I hope you're all doing well. I will be checking in later with you guys. AP Psych, I'll see you at 1 o'clock today on the Google Meet. And Psych Honors, we will figure out what we want to do as well for the rest of the year. So more info to come, and I'll speak to you guys soon. Thank you.